Let's look at Percy through the years and find out what is the best version of Percy. We'll be looking at 6 different versions of the number 6 engines from 30 years of Thomas Wooden Railway. Let's begin with the history, and let's start with the oldest Percy. The wooden railway line was first created in 1992, and in those early days there were a lot of changes to the first engines of the line, including Percy. The Percy I have includes many of the classic details of the early engines. Staples on the bottom, thin wheels, no date on the wheels, flat magnets, and a flat wooden funnel. Over the years, the line began changing some of these features, and skipped to 2001, the staples have been removed, wheels are thicker, date on the bottom of the wheels, round magnets, and a plastic funnel. While there's a close to 10-year difference between these two Percys, I find these models to be very similar overall. My personal favorite part of these Percys are their faces. I think they have the best faces of all the Percy models and do such a great job matching the face of Percy from the early seasons when it was available to be purchased. Now in 2002, Learning Curve made the big decision to redesign their wooden railway line. To date, this was the biggest change to Percy. Percy now has a bigger smoke box and face. His boiler now includes red stripes and is bigger than it was before. This version stayed unchanged for nearly 10 years. That's when Percy's face was updated to the CGI face. Come 2013, we have another change to the wooden railway line. This time, Fisher-Price has taken over and will now be producing the line. So with it, of course, comes a new change to Percy. Although it's actually pretty similar to the 2002 version, the two major changes include a gold dome for Percy and a new CGI face. This Percy continued on until the original Thomas Wooden Railway line was retired at the end of 2017. In 2018, Thomas & Friends Wood was introduced. The big feature of this line was the lack of paint, to show that these items were made from wood. And this Percy is smaller than any other version of Percy to date. However, a year later, they decided to fully paint Percy and all the other engines of this line. However, the line would not last long and would be quickly retired, and come 2022, it was replaced with the revived Thomas Wooden Railway line. With the new 2022 Wooden Railway line, Percy was once again redesigned. Compared to the original line, Percy was a lot smaller than he was before. Percy also, for the first time ever, now has a surprised face. And that's where we are today. If you want to go out and buy a Wooden Railway Percy, this is the one that's available to you. So now that we've looked at 6 different Percys through the 30 years of Wooden Railway, let's compare and find out which one is the best. I've decided to split the Percys up into 3 eras, and we will pick the best of each era. Starting with the original versions of Percy, I personally prefer the 2001 version to the original 1992 one. And frankly, it makes sense. You would hope as the years go on it improves, and while it's pretty similar to the original version, what really pushes me over the edge is the plastic funnel. Even though it's kind of the start of the plastic in the wooden railway line, I just like the look of the plastic funnel over the wooden one. It just looks more realistic to me. That's why I go with the 2001. Now the next era Percy, pretty similar to the first one. The two versions are very similar, not too many differences between them. That being said, I am going to go with the 2002 one, mainly because of the face. Maybe it's because I grew up with this one more so than the CGI one, but I really like the face more than I do the CGI one. I mean, there's a reason that that was my icon for 8 years on my channel, and the CGI one never was. All those reasons, I go with the 2002 Percy. And finally, the newest era, I mean, what is there to say? Thomas & Friends Wood was terrible, it was retired so quick, and this version in particular only lasted a year before they redid it and had Percy fully painted, but frankly even that version wasn't that good. I mean, if you want to compare that to the 2022 one, it still loses to the 2022 one. The newest version of Percy is just completely superior, and it's not even close. By far the worst version of all these Percys is the Thomas and Friends Wood one, and I gladly pick the 2022 version over the Thomas and Friends Wood one. And here we are with our top 3 Percys. We have Percy from 2001, Percy from 2002, and Percy from 2022. I'll be honest, these are 3 great models of Percy. I had a difficult time deciding what the order would be. I've constantly changed my thoughts. But I will say this about them. There's a reason that so many people, when they use Percy in their videos, it's the 2001 or 2002 one. In part because that's most likely the ones they grew up with. But I think of the original Wooden Railway line, these are the best 2 models of Percy you can get. All that being said, 3rd place goes to the 2001 Percy. Now, I really like this model, but compared to the other 2, it just doesn't have the detail they do. Now, sure, the 2001 version of Percy, I think, looks a lot closer size-wise to what we see for Percy on TV than the 2002 one, just because it seems smaller, but that's about the only thing I can give it. It just doesn't have the detail. I think that's a large part of why they updated the line in 2002. They wanted to give these engines more detail, and I think that was the correct move. So while I really like this version of Percy, I have to give it 3rd place. Now, it was really tough to decide who would be 1st and 2nd, but for 2nd place, I'm going with the 2002 model of Percy. I really like this one. As I mentioned earlier, this was my icon for a very long time on YouTube. But honestly, the size part is what really makes it not get the 1st place. If it was a correct size to what we see on Percy, I probably would give it to this one, but it just looks so big compared to the other versions of Percy. It just feels so big, and that's ultimately what moves it to 2nd place for me. Which that means 1st place goes to the 2022 Percy. This one hasn't been available that long, but it's just so good. It's really the first one that's got Percy's size correct, especially when you compare him to Thomas and the other characters of this line. Percy is the smallest engine you can purchase, and I just love that. They finally got the size correct. To me, the biggest negative is his face. I just wish he had a smiling face like the rest of them, but ultimately I decided not to have that be the reason Percy wouldn't get 1st. The wheels were a very controversial part as well. A lot of people weren't fans of it, but honestly, I've grown on them. I like the detail, and I feel they look much more like an engine's wheel than what the old Wooden Railway had for wheels. So I really like that. I like the design. It's so detailed, and it just does a good job of showing what Percy looks like on TV and bringing it to us. I just wish he had a normal smiling face. I would love if they used this type of face for, if he was part of a destination or something, like what he's in the Roundhouse. Why not use that face for Percy and just give the basic one you can buy a smiling face? But regardless, what a great Percy. There's a reason I use the 2022 items in my videos. It's just such a great Percy. I assume you probably have one of the older models that I showed off in this video, but if you don't have this Percy already, highly, highly, highly recommend going out and getting there. This is such a great version of Percy, and that's why it is my #1 Percy, and it is the best Wooden Railway Percy.